Hold on. Okay. I'm gonna do some cleanup out here. Oh, he is not gone. That's alright. Let's leave this. Get the big stuff in the back. Right back. Still making a sound. All right, shalom, shalom, family. Let me just pause real fast because this thing. All right, shalom, shalom, family. Let me go back there. Okay, so let's say the Lord's Prayer before we start. Our Father in heaven, honored be thy name. May thy kingdom come. May thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us each day our daily bread, and forgive us of our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us on a righteous path, and guard us from the evil one. In your name we pray. Amen. I'm just posting some scriptures that I'm going to comment on real fast. I think it's important that we learned about the Assyrian captivity. So today we're going to learn about Assyria and a few things of Assyria and why it's important to know about Assyria and how Assyria exists today. Assyria exists today. Let me show you something real fast before we start. I'm going to play a quick, as always, a little historical video real fast and talk about the growth of Assyria. So Assyria, now if you remember, the northern tribes were destroyed by Assyria. The people in the northern tribes were actually sent down by one of the kings of Assyria, as mentioned in some other reports where they were sent. Few people actually know where they was actually sent. So we're going to talk about some of those things as well. Now, there's a very interesting event that happens with the king of Assyria. It's one of the most, one of many of the most, how do you describe it? The times where God basically sent his own army to do his own work. Remember, at that time, I'm gonna show you these certain scriptures. Before I show you that, we're going to talk about the growth of Assyria. These are just some of the earlier kings. We don't have to worry about that right now. We're going to work our way into, you see these times of the kings, until we get to the time of Israel. And then we start to see the 800s, 700s, especially those times we want to pay attention to. So this is just talking about its history throughout all time. You can see how it was. Assyria had a lot of competition going on with Babylon and a lot of the areas over here. There was actually a lot of kingdoms that reigned around these areas where the Tigris and the Euphrates River is. I don't know why I don't have a map open. Should definitely have a map. I like to have that map open to go over those things. All right. It's just still talking about how it's growing. Just letting it go by. I'm gonna skip a matter of fact, I'll just make it a little faster. Is working his way up there. Still past there. About this time, Israel is making his way into Egypt. So Israel, obviously Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, they made their way down. They dwelled in Egypt. Moses, in this time, about this time right here, this is when they're coming out of the wilderness, right? They left Egypt and they crossed over this river, the Red Sea, and they went over here. They were landing in this area. So this was going on around this time. You got the sea peoples that's going to be arriving in this area. So they're going to be sitting here. Israel's kind of making their way through, right? They get these lands now about the time of David. And now you're going to have the time of Solomon, right? Now we're getting there. Now we're getting to the time of the kings. Let's let that thing load. So we're getting to the time of the kings. Just a note, Rehoboam and Jeroboam, right? 928 BC. That's the time frame. So they're about to come, the time of the king. So still Solomon. And then we get the split of the kingdoms. The new other kings come in. And then you're going to have your northern and southern tribes. Now, this is where things are going to get really, really intense for them, because this is where they're going to start to see the exile coming soon. So we're getting closer to it. So the exile, very, very close. You can see that those years. You can see the growth right real fast. You see how fast it grew? Right then and there, this is getting close to the time when the kings are going to get exiled. So the last king, about 724 BC. Here it comes, it's coming. So you can see they came down, making their way to Sidon and Tyre, right? Going down, Damascus, boom. You see how they grew? They took over these areas. That's what we want to pay attention to. So they win these areas. And remember, what happened in the land of Jerusalem? This is where we're going to get this. Let me go and grab these. This is where we're going to get these sayings, right? The precepts in Isaiah 37 and 2 Kings 19, right? Notice what it's going to say here. It's going to talk about a certain king here. Sennacherib, King Sennacherib. Let's go back here. Here's King Sennacherib. King Sennacherib, he's about this time. He's in the area of Neviah, right? And he's actually going to be the king that's noted in the scriptures. Now, it's important to know that he goes to Anatolia. Now, where is Anatolia? Let me see if this thing opens. Oh, I don't want it to open up on another tab. I don't want it to bug out with me. I don't know what's going to happen if I have it on another tab. Yep, that's right. We're gonna talk about that. We're gonna talk about that too. Yep, that's right. We did learn about the Turkish Jews. We did learn about that. That's right. So you see right here. Now it's important. I'm gonna show you something. How the Assyrians actually mingled with the Armenians. The Assyrians actually became one with the Armenians, and I'm gonna show you that today. And I'm also gonna show you a little hit on the Assyrian conquest. So Syria, the Assyrians would have been about here. The leader. Let me go to make sure this is on the screen. Right here. Watch what it says right here. And it came to pass as he was worshiping in the house. Let's talk about Sennacherib, right? Because the Lord sent angels and destroyed their camp. I'm gonna show you the Assyrian tablet. Well, not a tablet, but a stone. I'm gonna show you a stone with an inscription on it that is gonna talk about this as well. So we're gonna look at that. So watch what it says here. He says, it came to pass, because he left, he retreated, as it says on the first part right there. It says, so Sennacherib, king of Assyria, departed and went and returned and dwelled in Neviah, right? And this is after, obviously, their army was destroyed. If you don't know the story, just a quick summary. Assyria came to Jerusalem. Hezekiah was there with Isaiah, the prophet Isaiah, and then basically one of the kings of Assyria tried to, well, not the king of Assyria, but a messenger of Assyria came there with a message from the king, Sennacherib, and he was over there mocking not just Judah, but he was mocking God. The people were mocking God and trying to say God can't deliver Jerusalem from the hands of the king of Assyria. So the Lord answered, and he said, they're going to surely bear their iniquity. So he basically did what he did with them and sent an angel and slayed a whole bunch of them, 100,000 something, for the sake of understanding. But notice what he says on this part right here. So Sennacherib, he left, is also mentioned in Kings. The book of Kings, it also mentions the same thing right there. You can see where it says Sennacherib, king of Assyria, departed and went and returned and dwelt in Nineveh. Now watch what it says here. It says, and it came to pass as he was worshiping in the house, basically of his idol, that, watch what it says here. Basically, his sons came. I know how you pronounce that. I'm not going to try to pronounce it. But his sons came and smote him with the sword. And they escaped to, notice where his sons left to Armenia. So you see what it's saying there? So they came here and they left to Armenia. So that's very important to note that they were here and they left to Armenia. They went to dwell in that area of Armenia. Let's see a little more in his history, because it's also a king after him. That's the last king that we want to see too. So he was expanding these areas and whatnot. And this is the last king right here. He did one of the major expansions to the tribes, and then they were brought down to the end right there, as you can see. We'll close this. All right, we don't need that. Now, let's talk about, I'm going to talk about Armenia, the mountain area, afterwards. But first, let me close this. And let's talk about the Assyrian captivity real fast. I want to show you a really interesting historical tour of the Assyrian captivity. So I'm going to let you see a real quick Assyrian tour. And I want to show you a certain part in Pacific.
Egypt is in the south. Over in the east, in Mesopotamia, was the ancient empire of Assyria. And that's where these reliefs are from, Assyria. Sandwiched in the middle of Assyria, which is now modern-day Iraq, and Egypt was Israel, the nation of Israel. So now they're kind of in the middle of a lot of controversy, and then they were.
So this is a really interesting little tour guide. Does a little tour on a bunch of ancient things with Assyria and the wall paintings and everything and whatnot. I want to show you a timestamp here that I think is very interesting to take a note on.
Me the difference.
I want you to see this because the Assyrian captivity was well documented on who they had. I want you to see exactly who they had and where they sent them. Where they actually sent these individuals is very important. They actually sent these individuals into Africa. And I want you to understand that they would have blended in very well, especially when you see what they look like. Watch how he describes what they look like. And remember, he's doing a tour guide for the British Library or the British Museum, for the sake of understanding. Let's see what's going on here.
Between this guy and this guy. Whose side do you think this guy's on? The Assyrians, yeah, the conquerors, the Assyrians. And whose side do you think this guy's on? The slave, yeah, the people from Israel or Lachish. You can tell also by their distinctive hairstyle depicted in archaeology.
Now, did you hear what he just said? I want you to see what he actually said here.
The Assyrians, yeah, the conquerors, the Assyrians. And whose side do you think this guy's on? The slave, yeah, the people from Israel or Lachish. You can tell also by their distinctive hairstyle depicted in archaeology.
Just for clarity, he's basically saying the people of Israel were blackish. Now, I want to show you something. If you've never seen this, let me actually go to Google. Because we're going to do a little history on this. So here's the Assyrian captivity. You can see the actual, what the actual people look like. You get an idea. It's very important. You can see different idea. Here's a more painted one. And you can see this one, what they would look like. That's a more like kind of a clear look to it. Go back out. You can get an idea of this. So you get an idea of the Assyrian captivity. Here's that picture that he said looks blackish. And you can tell by the hairstyle, the way they look. and I'm going to show you that they were sent into Africa. But first, what I want to show you here is a quick history of it. I want to show you how these things are documented on tablet. So I'm going to show you this. First, this is the British Museum. This is that writing here. I'm going to show you something that's written on this tablet here. Very interesting historical information. I'm going to show you that side by side with the Bible. This is an interesting video I found. I think a great way to explain it.
As for Hezekiah the Judahite, who did not submit to my yoke, 46 of his strong-walled cities, as well as the small towns in their area, which were without number, by leveling with battering rams, and by bringing up siege engines, and by attacking and storming on foot, by mines, tunnels, and breaches I besieged and took them. From King Sennacherib's prism, dated 689 BCE. Now it came to pass in the 14th year of King Hezekiah that Sennacherib, king of Assyria, came up against all the fortified cities of Judah and took them. Isaiah 36:1. In the year 701 BCE, during the third campaign of King Sennacherib, his Assyrian army swept out of the capital to capture or subjugate all of the Phoenician coast, Philistia, and Egypt, including kingdoms of Judea. The triumphs are recounted in the biblical passages of Isaiah and repeated on Sennacherib's monuments. Hezekiah, king of Judah, sent this message to the king of Assyria at Lachish. I have done wrong. Withdraw from me, and I will pay you whatever you demand of me. The king of Assyria exacted from Hezekiah, king of Judah, 300 talents of silver and 30 talents of gold. So Hezekiah gave him all the silver that was found in the temple of the Lord and in the treasuries of the royal palace. 2 Kings 18:14. Sennacherib's version says, As for Hezekiah, the terrifying splendor of my majesty overcame him, and the Arabs and his mercenary troops which he had brought in to strengthen Jerusalem, his royal city, deserted him. 30 talents of gold and 800 talents of silver he had brought after me to Nineveh, my royal city, to pay tribute. Behold, Sennacherib's royal capital city of Nineveh. The grand palace without rival of the Assyrian king Sennacherib, who ruled from 705 to 681 BCE. Six of his strong-walled cities, as well as the small towns in their area, which were without number, by leveling with battering rams, and by bringing up siege engines, and by attacking and storming on foot, by mines, tunnels, and breaches I besieged and took them. From King Sennacherib's prism, dated 689 BCE. Now it came to pass in the 14th year of King Hezekiah that Sennacherib, king of Assyria, came up against all the fortified cities of Judah and took them. Isaiah 36:1.
So, real fast, this is really important. So, this history is the history that is recorded on this stone, right? On this very stone right here that they have physically, a physical external copy that shows us the physical and historical account of what the biblical narrative is. Now, the biblical narrative is going to give us more detailed information on this event, but these are events that we ourselves know is true. These are events we know that had happened,
He swept
that
out of
surely
the
came
capital.
to pass. Now, I want to show you something that's very important also to note. Did you know? Let me actually before we get to the last piece. Before we get to the last piece, um, it's important. I want to do a quick historical understanding on this thing, as well as that. I know that was probably a little bit enough on that, but I want to talk about this later king, and I want to talk about some things that happened with him. But it's important to understand a little history of Assyria. So I think it's important we go on a little history on Assyria. If you're familiar with it, it's just a recap. But
They
if you're
created
not,
the largest empire the world had ever seen, the first professional standing army in history, and were the first true masters of siege warfare, grinding the walls of their enemies into dust and displacing large populations at a whim. The fury of Assyria was the terror of their age. The city-state of Ashur, named for the warlike god of the same name, was founded nearly 2,000 years before the height of the Assyrian Empire. Originally a Sumerian settlement, the city then became dominated by the Akkadian Empire of Sargon of Akkad, whom the later Assyrians viewed as their direct ancestors. During the
real fast, just connecting a different people, the Akkadians. This is where right here. They're also going to be related with the Sumerians. Now, it's important to understand a little bit with this. Let me go down. Ashkenaz is well known with this for the sake of understanding. Right here, scholars have identified the Ashkenaz as the people called Ashkuz, in where you see Akkadian, right? That's what he's talking about there. You can see this is where a lot of connections are going to come in. A lot of different connections are actually going to start coming in when you actually study a little bit of the Assyrians and everything. And then also we know that, just to show you this, they did a DNA test and they know the Assyrians, the Jews, the Turks are all the same. In fact, here's a idea of it. This is taking the Armenians, which have the exact same everything. All Y chromosomes in the Assyrian, as stated, is exactly the same as the Armenian. There's no major Y chromosome group in the Armenian that's not found in the Ashkenazi. That's 100% fact. They also know that the Assyrian is 100% the same. Well, not 100%. You can see it's a little change. I'm not gonna say 100, but you can see that they actually have merged with the Assyrians for the sake of understanding. You can see just a little change here, but they actually know that they are the same. And just for the sake of understanding, just to show you that saying is actually true, let me see. Okay, right here. So this, make sure I show you this. This is a quote. This is an actual genetic quote here. I'm gonna click this. You can see this. What I'm gonna show you is an actual quote right here. This is gonna be a paper right here. I'm gonna show you what's gonna be said here when they looked at the Y chromosome of these groups. Let me go up a little bit. Okay. It says, in fact, there is no major Y chromosome haplogroup found among Ashkenazi Jews that are not also found among Armenians, and vice versa. That means vice versa either way. If you say Ashkenazi, you're saying Armenian. If you say Armenian, you're saying Ashkenazi, is what they're saying, which would indicate the source population for these groups, while diverse to begin with, were in geographic proximity. So that means they basically started around the same area for the sake of understanding. And they had the same genetics. Now, the reason why this is important is because what you're going to see is that there's a lot of prophetic words to the Assyrians and that we still have Assyrians today. It's very important to understand that. And many of the things that have been done before It's nothing new under the sun. That there's still a lot of it is still happening for the sake of understanding. So that's why you see that a lot of words like Ashkenaz are coming up because these are known in history, and this is the Jewish library, right? This is their own writings and everything. I'm gonna show you a connection with these things with the Gemari and Sumerians. Let me show you something real fast. I'm not gonna show you this video; is really long, but I'll show you a short part on it. Let me just go right here real fast. 1:8:15. Let me show you a quick part of this thing.
And the Chaldeans interpret Javan message. Destroying or subjugating. We're going to get back to the Assyrians so you can see what I'm talking about. But we're going to continue with Japhet. It says the race of Japhet is then, which see in the Tigris and in the mountains of Media and Persia. We see that in very ancient.
Go back a little bit
this
more.
is where their original home was, though. Indo-Greeks, Indo-Europeans, Indo. So again, these last nations, by the collective name of Aryans, remained for a long time concentrated countries watered by the Oxus and Jarchis. This is in Bactria, all right? Bactria, we just saw where that was. The region which was the original dwelling of the whole race. Thence one branch directed its course to the south, crossed the Hindu Kush, and penetrated into India, destroying or subjugating the earlier Hamitic, what did I say? Hamitic populations, Ham.
All right, so what you're going to see here, and what I'm going to show you right here, is it's going to show you how a lot of the Japhetic nations actually took over a lot of areas like the Canaanites and the Hamites. A lot of Hamites were destroyed and taken by a lot of the Japhetic peoples. And what you're going to see is that that's going to involve the Assyrians. You're going to see that the basically a lot of the who they call the Indo-European actually mixed in with the Assyrian. So you're going to see a historical document. We also confirmed it in genetics, but here's a historical document.
Hamitic, Ham, Hindu-Kush, Kushite, Kush. Who's Kush, son of Ham? All right. The other established itself in the country which lies between the Caspian Sea and the Tigris, and in the mountains of Media and Persia. We see that in very ancient times they mixed with the Assyrians. Again, they mixed with who? Assyrians, and that they even ruled over them for several centuries. Who ruled over the Aryans, ruled over the Assyrians, and they mixed. So the Assyrians became Aryans too, right? Who were the Assyrians? The people of Ashur, who was a son of Shem. They were Semitic people, not Hebrews, but they were Semitic people of Shem too, who mixed with who? Japhet's people, the Aryans. All right, Assyrians. All right, so keep.
If you don't remember, we did a quick study before on who are the Aryans and everything. That today is actually was of the Japhetic theory. That is actually going to be the new thing called Indo-European, where you see right there, the Indo-European. Very important to understand that Indo-European is now what you would of old call Aryan. Just talking about the lines of Japheth, and basically saying that they actually merged with the Assyrian, for sake of understanding. I'm not gonna show you this thing. This is a nice long video. It goes over it again, but let me close this and let's get back to it. The reason why I want to show you that is just to show you why it's important to know this history, because the Assyrian actually mixed in with a people today, and we can find the genetics for them. Now let's continue.
The following Neo-Sumerian Empire, the Assyrians sporadically fell under their influence, although typically they managed to maintain independence. In the beginning of the period known as the Assyrian Old Empire, a stable line of independent kings allowed for Assyrian merchants to develop lucrative trade routes, particularly with Anatolia, where they built permanent colonies that operated for hundreds of years. In Ashur, as well as with other nearby city-states such as Nineveh, this newfound prosperity led to large-scale public building projects and relevance on the international stage, with the other major powers of the day, Mari, Yamhad, Babylon, and the other city-states of southern Mesopotamia. One by one, the ruling dynasties of these states were replaced by Amorite warlords who had migrated from near the plains and hill country of southeastern Syria. Originally described by the Sumerians as a vile people who ate raw meat and did not bury their dead, the Amorites would one day be regarded as the most culturally sophisticated people of Mesopotamia, especially at Babylon. Shem-Shi-Adad is believed to have been one of these warlords. His ancestors were later described as the kings who lived in tents. His father and then he had ruled over the city of Ekalatum on the Assyrian plain. He fled to Babylon when the king of Eshnunna conquered much of the Assyrian plain. When that king died, 7 years later, Shamshi-Adad returned and reconquered Ekalatum and Ashur from Eshnunna. It was during the reign of Shamshi-Adad that a coherent political unity was established between the Assyrian city-states, and a strong national identity rare for the time began to evolve between them. Shamshi-Adad conquered vast territories, going from fugitive to great king of an empire. Not a humble man, he granted himself the title, King of the Universe. Shamshi-Adad's kingdom of Upper Mesopotamia would not last long after his death, being eclipsed by the empire of Hammurabi of Babylon in the pages of history. However, his political unification of Assyria, as well as their memory of being the heartland of a vast empire, would have a profound impact for many centuries to come. Babylon's power declined after Hammurabi's death, although it remained the greatest power in Mesopotamia, as two new people groups, the Hurrians and the Kassites, migrated into the region. This largely peaceful time period went up in flames, as the Hittites, a people from central Anatolia, destroyed the kingdom of Yamhad, and sacked Babylon, ending the Amorite dynasty of Hammurabi's descendants, in a campaign so rapid that no effective resistance was organized. This massive power vacuum that the Hittites left behind was filled by the Kassites, who rebuilt Babylon, and the Hurrians, who united their squabbling kingdoms together to form the Empire of Mitanni, which came to dominate Upper Mesopotamia and rule over Assyria for 200 years. The Mitanni were a warlike people, whom the Assyrians learned much from, in the art of warfare and the administration of a large empire. They succumbed to internal infighting, allowing Assyria to gain independence without a fight. Pro-Assyrian and Hittite puppet kingdoms formed. During the reign of Adad-Nirari, the Mitanni puppet kingdom was annexed, while achieving major military victories against foes in nearly every direction, solidifying Assyria as one of the great states. Calling himself a great king, equal to the pharaoh of Egypt, the ruler of Babylon, and the Hittite Empire, the older great powers did not acknowledge the upstart, viewing him as a rebellious vassal state that had achieved some temporary success. During the reign of his son Shalmaneser, everyone would acknowledge Assyria's ascendancy. After defeating a coalition of Mitanni rebels, Hittites, and nomadic desert kings, he blinded 14,400 captured prisoners of war in one eye, resettling them far from their homelands in unfamiliar territory, making them less likely to rebel, which later became a standard Assyrian practice for dealing with rebellious populations. Often,
Does this practice seem very similar, where they take the people and place them somewhere else so that they don't know who they are? Very important to understand that this is actually what Assyria did. Assyria took, I'm going to show you the history, how they took Israel and they actually placed them into Egypt. I'm going to show you that this is what Assyria, Sennacherib did. Sennacherib took, when he took the children of the northern tribes, he didn't keep them up here. That wasn't the way that the Assyrians worked. They actually would take their captives and put them in different locations. So they actually took them here. They didn't take them here. They actually brought them down here. I'm going to show you that when we get there.
utilizing this to move skilled labor where it was needed most. Shalmaneser's son, Tukulti-Ninurta, expanded the empire to its greatest extent yet, capturing Babylon and taking the ancient title, King of Sumer and Akkad, the first native Mesopotamian to do so in many centuries. Seeking to ensure Babylon's secondary status, he demolished the walls of the city and relocated the statue of their chief god Marduk back to Assyria. Tukulti-Ninurta was as gifted a military strategist as he was ruthless. After campaigning down the Arabian coast, as far as modern-day Bahrain, he defeated the Elamites, who he believed planned to take Babylon. He then engaged in a brutal act of sacrilege after a failed Babylonian revolt, massacring much of the city's population while looting and defiling the city's temples. While Mesopotamia was in shock, Tukulti-Ninurta spent his time writing an epic poem about himself, as well as building a new capital city, also named after himself. His sons, with the backing of the Assyrian priesthood, besieged their father at his new capital city, where the unpopular king was murdered. Babylon regained its independence, while Assyria focused on consolidating its borders, as the old Bronze Age empires to the west contracted or fell while being subjected to waves of invading marauders, known as the Sea People. Babylon was conquered by the Elamites, followed by weak local dynasties, becoming a third-rate power. Only Egypt and Assyria would survive the Bronze Age collapse. Great cities lay abandoned, and international diplomacy and trade all but disappeared. Over the next 100 years, while most of the Near East was in a dark age, Assyria was the only major power able to capitalize on the collapse.
Few people know this, but there's always a dark age. There's always a dark age when there's something that happens. Like, for example, Israel came out of the wilderness. They dwell in this area and everything about this time. And this is where they start to become kings and everything. And they start establishing themselves in these areas. And then soon you're going to see, after when the 700 BCs come, you're going to see that that's when they're going to take the northern tribe.
Collapsing world. Babylon regrouped under a native southern Mesopotamian dynasty, once again becoming a rival for Assyria. As Egypt devolved into squabbling city-states, several ruled by foreign warlords, Assyria further developed its warrior culture, making military service compulsory for all adult citizen males, and began introducing iron weapons into the rank and file during the late Middle Assyrian period. Assyria's fine-tuned war machine was not its only accomplishment during this time. The Assyrian king, Ashur-bel-kala, built the world's first known public botanical gardens and zoo, where he collected and bred many rare animals, including primates and crocodiles, many sent by the Egyptians, seeking to curry favor with Assyria. For the remainder of the Middle Period, Assyria was typically governed by competent but not exceptional kings, who were content to rule over the heavily militarized Assyrian heartland, while raiding their immediate neighbors to keep them weak. Egypt reunified, and two new peoples migrated into Mesopotamia. The Chaldeans took Babylon in the south, while pastoral Aramean-speaking tribes dominated the north. As they became dominant there, Assyrian refugees poured into the heartland, as many had been enslaved and had their land seized by the newcomers. In response, the Assyrian king Ashur-dan II embarked on the first campaigns of conquest in over 100 years, taking and resettling land with Assyrians while deporting Arameans. Ashur-dan spent the spoils of his conquests on infrastructure, building well-built roads allowing armies to move much quicker to the front, and aqueducts to increase farmable land and population. After a brief civil war, Adad-nirari II took the throne. Following his father's lead, Adad-nirari II continued conquering and building aqueducts and roads. And perhaps more importantly, he began the practice of building massive fortified administrative centers and supply depots where large amounts of grain and weapons were stored near the frontier in every province. Adad-nirari II's yearly campaigns set the standard that all self-respecting Assyrian kings followed, maintaining it as their sacred duty to wage yearly war. His grandson, Ashurnasirpal II, greatly expanded the empire and built a new magnificent capital city named Kalhu, also called Nimrud. A significant development during his reign would be the unification of the Neri people into the kingdom of Urartu, which would be a longtime rival of Assyria. During the long reign of his son Shalmaneser III, Babylon was captured, as well as much of the Urartu heartland around Lake Van. Following Shalmaneser's death, his son defeated his brother in a 4-year-long civil war. As the empire contracted, he was succeeded by his wife, the only female regent in Assyrian history. Sa'am-muramat reigned for 5 years until her son came of age. He conquered the Medes, a newly arrived people in the east. After his reign, nearly 40 years of internal stagnation and instability ensued, until the reign of Tiglath-Pileser III. Perhaps the greatest king in Assyria's history, he not only constantly campaigned effectively, he instituted numerous reforms. Instead of a few large provinces administered by powerful nobles, Tiglath-Pileser divided the empire up into over 80 small provinces typically governed by a eunuch, with no descendants, solely loyal to him. He also realized that despite Assyria's large population, they lacked the manpower to match the monarch's imperial ambitions. To solve this, he created the first professional national standing army in history, allowing anyone within the empire's borders to join. Now, anyone could become Assyrian, as long as they were willing to adopt the culture, worship the god Ashur, and wage perpetual war. The ranks of the army swelled with the adventurous and ambitious, in a new type of army that could wage war year-round. For the first time in history, siege engines and cavalry became an integral part of the army. Tiglath-Pileser III was followed by a century filled with exceptional kings, such as Sargon II, Sennacherib, Esarhaddon, and Ashurbanipal, who expanded the empire to its greatest extent, making it the largest empire in history at that time. Assyria's deserved reputation for brutality, extreme even by the standards of the time, made it many enemies, especially within its own borders. First, Egypt successfully rebelled, and then an allied army of Babylonians and Medes struck the Assyrian heartland without warning. Nineveh, the greatest city in the world at that time, went up in flames. And over the next 3 years, Assyrian heartland without warning. Nineveh, the greatest city in the world at that time, went up in flames.
That part, we already did a historical study on that, on the Scythians. The Medes and the Babylonians came and attacked Assyria from above. It's important to know that that would also include the Scythians.
And over the next 3 years, an empire seemingly at the height of its power succumbed to the vengeance of its subjects. And even though the empire was thoroughly destroyed, the Assyrians have survived to the present day as a distinct people. If you enjoyed this video,
So, as you can see, there is a people called the Assyrians today, but we actually know that the Armenians, the Ashkenazi, a lot of them are actually Assyrian. Very important to understand. Now, I want to show you something. I'm going to show you something that's very interesting, that I think is very interesting to see. Let me close this. That's just that one that I was showing you. I was showing you that indeed the Assyrian is also going to be Armenian. Very important to understand. And the Armenian is actually going to be the same as the Ashkenazi. This is another summary of it. This one, I'm not going to go over right now. This just goes over some things on how they rised up in their paper. I'm just going to show, let me see, where is it? One thing at the end. So right here. Just some writings and some things real fast.
Ashurbanipal's library took the form of clay tablets inscribed with cuneiform in the languages of Akkadian and Sumerian. The library was lost during the final sack of Nineveh in 612 BCE, but thanks to a 19th century archaeological excavation, many masterpieces of ancient literature, including the Epic of Gilgamesh and the Babylonian creation epic, survive today. After centuries of rule, the Assyrian Empire fell to the Babylonians and Medes between 612 and 609 BCE. Yet the innovations that the Assyrians pioneered live on. Their emphasis on constant innovation, efficient administration.
So the reason why I wanted to show you that is because there's a study of linguistics. It's important, even ancient linguistics. When you study languages, the Assyrians had their own little language going on. We'll talk about that another time. It's really interesting to go into and look at some of those writings that they have. But let me show you something when we talk about writings. I want to show you writings. I want to show you some writings that came after the Assyrian captivity that shows you that the people in that time actually knew without a doubt that the Assyrians, when they took, remember how I showed you that their practice was taking people and basically putting them in different locations, not keeping them with them, but moving them to different areas. Let me close this. And let me show you something. I want to show you something because I think it's quite interesting. Let me see where that is. I just put it on here. Let me show you something real fast. Okay. Right here. I want to show you that they knew that where they put the people when Assyria had took the people, the northern tribes. I want to show you
Israel.
where they put them. I want to show you something. Skip a little ahead and show you something. I talked about this before, but now I want you to see this whole thing real fast.
Now, when you go to the Talmud, here is the William Davidson edition of the Talmud. And in the book of Sanhedrin, 94a, so the book of Sanhedrin, chapter 94a and verse 15,
Book of Sanhedrin 94.
it says here in the Talmud, it says the Gemara asks, To where did Sennacherib exile the 10 tribes? Marzutra says he exiled them to Africae. He exiled them to Africae, which means Africa. So within the sources of the so-called Jews themselves, in the Talmud, it is written that the 10 tribes exiled to Africa. This is very important. Very important. This is a written proof that, first of all, the 10 tribes are not in America, but they are in Africa. Now, some of them could have gone with the ships into slavery, but I'm saying that the 10 tribes went to exile into Africa. And we know that right now, when we go to Africa and we see the Igbo, we see the Lemba, we see different groups in Ghana and all across Africa, we see that those who carry the E1B1A haplogroup keep the commandments and the laws and statutes of the Most High. So we know that they are Hebrew Israelites. And here it is proof in the Jewish owned resources that they were exiled to Africa. Now let me show you something else. Because of course the Jews will disagree with this, even though it is written in their own resource. So here is a book of Jewish thought.
Now this is amazing. If you're not paying attention, I want you to pay attention real fast. Why is this important? Because this thing that he's quoting, the Sanhedrin, is supposedly written all the way back. It's supposedly written all the way back to the time of the Greeks and the Persians. That Sanhedrin is supposedly written. It's what they call the Babylonian the Talmud. Understand, the Talmud is an abomination. But understand that it's saying that the northern tribe in their book is saying that it recognized that the northern tribe was actually going to be in Africa, right? Just this, it says. In fact, I'm gonna read you something from that site. This site right here. Matter of fact, maybe it'd be better. I'll show it for the live, so you don't think I'm giving a different date, because he's going to now quote somebody from 1589. He's going to quote something that happened around 1589, and I'm going to show you real fast. Matter of fact, I wonder, can I put it? Just grab it from here. Let's see. This thing is like slow. All right, my bad. I had it on mute real fast, so I want to show you something real fast. This quote, you see this? You see this quote right here that he has here, dated 1589. He's the person in 1589 is quoting something that was earlier, that was written in the Talmud, and I'm going to show you when this was actually written. When this thing was at supposedly the date of this being written, for the sake of understanding. Let me show you real fast if I can copy this. I don't know how to do it, but I'll try. All right. I just want to show you the dating on this thing, on when this supposed thing was written. I would just say it, but I want you to actually see it. So here's the Sanhedrin. It says composed in the Talmudic Babylonian, basically that thing, and it says 400 to 500 AD. You see what it's saying there? That's basically 400, 500 years after Messiah. That's what it's saying there. It's saying that this quote is 500 years after the Messiah, and it's saying the northern tribes were in Africa. That's when this thing was composed. So they're saying the northern tribes were in Africa. My bad. I mean the Persian, the time of the Persian and Greeks, rather in AD, not BC, AD BC, for the sake of understanding. So in 400, between these times, between these years, 450 to 550 AD, that's when this was written, right? Now you're going to get someone from the 1500s going to give a comment on it, while these was writing to some people who was in uh, Africa who were of the 10 tribes. Okay, so that's what you're seeing here. Watch what happens here.
which is written by a white European Jew. The location, as you see here on the screen, it's composed in Prague, which is in the Czech Republic in Europe. The date is 1589, and the topic is on exile and redemption. And here he goes to discuss what was written in the Talmud, because of course they can't agree with such a thing. So they need to write things in order to make the effect of such a writing be way less. So here in his book, Netzach Yisrael, chapter 34, he is writing about what we just read in the Talmud. And he says in the Babylonian Talmud, in chapter Chelek, Sanhedrin 94a, he said, to where were the 10 tribes exiled? Marzutra says, to Africae. And Rabbi Hanina says, to the Seluk Mountains. Now, according to the one who said Africae, there are no known Israelites in Africa. This is what this white Jew says. Even though it is written in the Talmud itself that they were exiled to Africa, he now comes and says there are no known Israelites in Africa. And one can say that they were mixed with the Gentiles, and that the dispute of Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Elazar is whether those mixed among the Gentiles will return in the future. For in the first chapter of Tractate Yevamot 17a, it is clear that we are not concerned for this possibility. For it says there, a presumed Gentile who attempts to perform Kiddushin, which is only effectable by an Israelite or proselyte nowadays, we are not concerned that the Kiddushin may be valid, since perhaps he is from the 10 tribes, as it is learned as a tradition that the girls from the 10 tribes of that generation became barren, and there was no further concern that there were descendants of the 10 tribes among the Gentiles. So what he wants to do here is they want to basically make up certain traditions by which they can make what the Talmud said in reference to the exile of the Israelites into Africa, that would become invalid. So they won't have to be concerned about that. So they won't have to be concerned about the fact that you, in fact, are a Jew, a real Jew. That we, those who carry the E1B1A, those who were taken into slavery, that we in fact are the real Jews, that we in fact are the real Israelites, that those who are in Africa right now, the Igbo, the Ghanaians, and all of those Africans that carry the E1B1A haplogroup, that they are the real Israelites. They don't want to be concerned about that, so they make up traditions by which they can make this invalid. But it is written in their own sources. In the last part of this, what is written here on the screen, if you look down below, I read where it says Megillah 14b, then it says Rabbi Akiva is only speaking regarding those of the 10 tribes who did not return in the days of Jeremiah, whether they are destined to return. Regarding them alone he said, and he cast them to another land as this day, means that they will never return. So this white Jew in his book is saying that this thing that is written in the Talmud about the Jews or the 10 tribes being exiled into Africa, there is no concern about that. We don't have to be concerned about that. In fact, there is a verse that means that they will never ever return. So don't be worried about it. That's what he is saying. Now, why does he say this? In order to keep things hidden, right? We know that there is a verse in the Bible that says that.
Do you understand that this person just basically root? Do you understand what he just said? This person on here just basically root here for sake of understanding. Let me just cover this real fast. He literally just said that the Lord forsook the 10 tribes. He said that the Lord had caused their bellies to not be able to bring forth babies, so he forsook the 10 tribes. That's what the Ashkenazi has to root here. When he reviewed the writing in the Sanhedrin and realized that the 10 tribes, they actually are lost in Africa. They were actually lost in Africa. Well, I don't know if we can do that, because then how can we relate ourselves to them genetically, right? Because remember how I showed you in those other videos how even many geneticists show that the Ashkenazi are indeed Turkish. In fact, he brings it up again. The person, I'm gonna show you something real fast, real interesting one I seen real fast. I thought to myself that it was something to go over. Actually, right here. Let me show you something at 250. Watch, he brings it up again. He brings it up and lets you know that that's truly his findings. Show you something.
Clear on the point I was trying to make. I emphasized a point that the mainstream scientific community did, and I didn't get to everything else they said. So let me back up to episode 18, where I was arguing that one of the dominant lineages in modern Jewish people, particularly Ashkenazi Jewish people, there was this paper in 2009 that came out claiming they could find one that seemed to fit all the proper parameters for being a Jewish lineage. Episode 18, we walked through some of the problems. The lineage specifically, and this is a direct screenshot from the paper. You may not be able to zoom in and see here. I'm going to try to highlight here. There's a whole bunch of different lineages being shown. There's D, E, C, G, H, I, J, L. There's many of the major groups in this tree that we've seen, and they have arranged by columns here the frequency of these various lineages in various Jewish groups. So this first column, which is headed by the letter C for the Kohanim, those who claim descent from the Jewish priesthood. This I column is just Israelites in general, who don't necessarily claim descent from the priesthood. And here's the percentage overall. The point I was emphasizing in that episode was dealing with one particular lineage, this J. You may not be able to see here because the screen is so small, but it's this J-P58. It's a sub-branch of the J lineage. I went on to conclude that J.
So real fast, what is he talking about? What J line is he talking about? Real fast, he's talking about the Kohanim. Now that's you cannot take that away. Understand this. He's gonna be honest and say that he only touched on one of those. We didn't just touch on one. We didn't touch on one of those Y chromosomes. We actually touched on them all of them. We touched on all the major Y chromosome groups, and there's other ones that I didn't go over. But yes, we did touch on them all for the sake of understanding. Let me just show you that again, that we went over this before we seen this video, and this person had the same understanding that they are indeed Turks. And understand, let me show you something real fast right here. We touched on every single Y chromosome. We didn't need to. We only needed to touch on these major ones. That's what we needed to touch on, these major ones. But we touched on all of them. Every last piece, we touched on them. But the major one is this one. The major one is this one. Going back over here, JP58. This one, very, very, very supposed important. This is M267. The problem with that is when you examine, and this person found it too. He found out when you examine that, it actually leads you to the Turks. That's actually what it leads you to. actually leads you right to the Turks. And that's what he's basically going to position here. Now, he's going to be honest and say he only looked at one of them because he knows that they're actually a mingled people with many different Y chromosomes. It's important to understand each one of those Y chromosomes brings us to a Turk, or it brings us to the barbarian, the barbarians, the people who they call the barbarians, for the sake of understanding. We looked at every single one of them, and the historical evidence is in agreement with it. So we just looked at those things, and I'm gonna show you something real fast on how he talks about it. Let's go back to it. Watch what he says here. Watch what he summarizes here.
Is probably an echo of the Turkish conquest of the Middle East, going in and then being pushed out by the Mongols and coming back in again. The reason I spent a lot of time there was because this is probably overall. The point I was emphasizing in that episode was dealing with one particular lineage, this J. You may not be able to see here because the screen is so small, but it's this J-P58. It's a sub-branch of the J lineage. I went on to conclude that J is probably an echo of the Turkish conquest of the Middle East, going in and then.
So you seeing what he's saying? He's going to be honest. He's going to tell you that it was only of one line, but we didn't touch on one line. We touched on them all. Let me show you find within note P58. Let me show you something real fast if I can grab it from here. All right, right here. All right, so we looked intensively into it as well. I didn't know that he was actually going to touch on this direct one. This direct one. I didn't know that this direct one was actually that important. But this direct one, we knew 100% without a doubt that this was a Turkish line because of the Avars. It's connected with the Avars. There's no doubt that these are Turks. In fact, all these are Turks. All these are actually Turks. And is in a high percentage, 99.9%, 99% in these ones. And these are Turks. These are confirmed Turks. So this Y chromosome that's in them is confirmed Turks, and we can actually look at the history and understand these things. And that's extremely important to know that they're Turks. This gives us a good understanding and understand the conversion that had happened, as you can see, as the Avars came in, the Khazars came in. These are, and what they called the Khazars were all the same people. They were just Turks. That's all that you see there. It was just all Turks. But one certain group that's known in history around 740 AD converted to Judaism, and that's when you find that Y chromosome in them. You find that certain Y chromosome in them, and that's how we know this is true. We see the Avars. We also see the Alans. They're also related to the Alans. I'll show you right here on this map. You can see right here the Alans right there. These are the same. They're going to be related. You can also see we have one that talks about the Alans. Show you something. Right here. Let me just make sure this is it. Up a little bit. This is another study where it talks about the leaders. They tested some of the leaders where it says the Kogan pretty much, and it said that indeed they were having that certain chromosome in it too. Let me see, where's that? Alans. Go to that one here. I think that's lower. Okay, right here. Here it is. Alans, the Turks. So here's the Alans. Now that's a Q. That's a different Y chromosome. That's QM242. But we also know that that's related as well. That's definitely related because that's also in them. And that's also Turkish. Very important with that one as well. And we see that on the map. We can see that one on the map. But going back to it, this is what he was talking about. He was saying that they were Turks. He's saying that their Y chromosome is pointing to them that they're actually Turks, and that certain Y chromosome is a Turk. But let's hear a little more on that explanation real fast here. So he just brought up that other study that we had looked at.
Sub-branch of the J lineage. I went on to conclude that J is probably an echo of the Turkish conquest of the Middle East, going in and then being pushed out by the Mongols and coming back in again. The reason I spent a lot of time there was because this was the main lineage that the paper highlighted as being potentially Jewish. What I didn't emphasize as clearly was, and you can see it in this chart, there's all sorts of other lineages present in this tree to which Jewish people belong. We didn't talk about it because what got the most press was this J lineage. They were trying to say this must be Jewish, and I was saying No, I think even though this is one of the more prominent lineages in the Ashkenazi Jews, this is probably not the original Jewish one. It appears to be Turkish. That does not mean all Jewish people are of Turkish descent, as if somehow the Jewish lineage has disappeared. There are multiple other lineages all throughout this tree. In general, J occupies a significant fraction of this, but there are, if you go to this paper and you look up this particular table, there's members of group E, including this E1B1B that we talked about in episode 19 being perhaps connected to the Arab Muslims, conquest of North Africa. There's a lot of really intriguing connections there. That's worth investigating.
All right, so we looked at all their Y chromosomes, and we know that they're Turks. In fact, they're not only Turks, they're also the Philistines. Very important to understand that. In their genetic code, they are surely, without a doubt, 100% the Philistines. They're the same people. And the Philistines were actually an Indo-European people. Very important to understand that. It's very high, that certain Y chromosome that is found in the Philistines. It's found in the Ashkenazi. That one for the Philistines will be M269. M269 will be right here. And then here's the Armenian line. This is connected with the Armenians and the Assyrians. M198. You can see here. This will be right here for it. And then J line is the highest one right here. The reason why he broke down the J line because that's the major one. That's the one that you want to look at. The highest one means that must be the purity of the people. Obviously not, for the sake of understanding. That's actually a major line showing us that they're Turks. They're actually majorly Turks. That's what they mainly are. The highest percentage is actually they're Turkish, and all of them actually lead to Turks, except for some that leads to certain lines of European, like the Philistine line and certain ones like this. So they're Turkish, European combinations, for the sake of understanding. Very, very important to take a look at some of these things. Very, very important. These ones, wait, where is it? Right here, E. This one is actually going to be very interesting. This is where he said that E1B1B, which is going to be inside of pretty much Hitler and different ones like that. That's going to be more of your closer to your Canaanite lines and different things like that, for the sake of understanding. Really interesting with some of these things. Really, really interesting to see with some of these things. Let me go down, because a lot of people when they think of Hamites, they think they're all dark. Now, obviously, they don't know 100% if they're all dark. In fact, there is written records in the Egyptian. What you're seeing here is what the Egyptians depict as what the Canaanites look like. This is what the Canaanites look like a darker skin, but a little lighter tone than dark than the actual Egyptians. So they're a little lighter than the Egyptians, but black hair, but lighter tone. And this is what the Egyptians said the Canaanites look like. This is a depiction of them. So right here, tiles from the reign of Ramses III, depicting captive Canaanites, which is actually, these are captive Philistines, for the sake of understanding. These are actually captive Philistines. When they first brought this record out, they thought they were Canaanites. They thought they found a Canaanite grave site, but they actually found the Philistines and actually opened the doors to who the Philistines are, which are the sea peoples. And they found out, and this actually opened a major understanding for things. And the Ashkenazi are 70 to 60% of them. Philistine. Very important to understand. And so they're Philistine Turks. That's actually what they are. But let's get back to a little more. I want to show you another thing. So you see how the Sanhedrin that's supposedly written, remember, this is supposedly written before 600 AD, right? Written before 600 AD, and it said that Jews were in Africa. I want to show you another one. I want to show you another one with evidence on this. So I showed you that another geneticist saying that indeed they are indeed Turks. That's what he's saying there. He didn't go back on it. He was honest. He said he didn't test them all. We did. We test them all. We proved them all the Y chromosomes. I even was doing some updates on this note, and I was noting some of the smaller ones just because there are tiny little ones, and I could see someone complaining like, well, it might be one of those tiny little ones, which would make no sense. That would truly mean that they're not a pure people. If it was one of these and not these, that means they're surely not Israel. They're not a pure people. That's what that would mean. No one can boast and say that they are pure people if it's those. But we did look at that. I looked at that, and maybe I'll talk about it another time. I won't talk about it right now. But I did look at those little ones to see who they were. And I guess in summary, they are indeed Turks, for the sake of understanding. Very interesting I'm not gonna go over it now, but it even this other one even matches with the linguistic study that finds them in Pontus in Anatolia, which is now called Turkey for the sake of understanding. They are actually the Goths for the sake of understanding, but that's another go into that another time. So Pontus for the sake of understanding. I'm not gonna go into it now. This is just a smaller one that I went over. Let me go up a little bit, and I did another smaller one. Let me see, where is that? Right here. That actually, here's the one of the Goths. This one's a really interesting one, but I'm not gonna go over it right now. So they're Turks. They're Turks. They're Goths. They're actually the Indo-European. That's actually who the Ashkenazi are, is without a doubt. If someone has anything to say otherwise, let us look at a Y chromosome and examine it as deep as we can, and I'll show you what we're actually going to see there. We're going to see that indeed they are Turks without a doubt. So that's what he found out. But he was trying to be fair with that. Let me show you another video. Let me show you another video. Remember what they said, what they look like. One more time. Let's get an idea of what he said here. Remember, this person is leading. You can watch this little video. You can look up yourself, the British Museum, basically talking about the Assyrian captivity.
Now, if you come down the line, you see the slave, and he's traumatized, but then he goes and he prays.
He's leading, he's leading them through the area. But let me show you something. Watch what he says here on what the Israelis look like. Watch what he says here.
On the line, we've got more slaves that are leaving the city. Now, somebody tell me the difference between this guy and this guy. Whose side do you think this guy's on? The Assyrians, yeah, the conquerors, the Assyrians. And whose side do you think this guy's on? The slave, yeah, the people from Israel or Lachish. You can tell also by their distinctive hairstyle depicted in archaeology.
The people from Israel was blackish. You can tell from their distinctive hairstyle depicted in archaeology. That's what he just said there, right? So what happened? How did they go from being blackish to being another shade? Let me show you something real fast. And the reason I'm gonna show you why I'm doing this. I'm doing this because before I show you, in fact, let me show you this and then I'll show you why I'm doing it. The reason why I'm doing this, because we already knew these things, but the reason why I'm bringing this out so much more than before is because if you don't know, there's a people in Israel today that are of a darker skin tone but if you test their genetics, they are actually people of that area. But these people are being deported because based upon race. Based upon race, that's why they're being deported. If it's based upon race, I beg to differ that if we had to take these things head to head and look at the genetics piece by piece, we will actually realize that these people who think that they're better than everyone else, calling themselves Israelis, are actually Turks, and they're actually hurting a lot of truths by what they're doing. But let me show you something real fast here. Let me show you something that I didn't show you on here. Let me see, where is that? Right here. Let me show you this. There's other piece of evidence of how you know that the people in Israel today, they know this stuff. You're going to see that the people who are in Africa right now, in West Africa, are actually the lost 10 tribes.
In this presentation, and descendants of black people according to the paternal line, meaning the E1B1A, we are in fact the real Jews.
Let me show you something.
Jew, who are the real ordained, as I will show to you in this presentation, according to the Ashkenazis themselves, we are the true ordained, and they are fake. Let me prove it. Here on the screen you see a book that is written by an Ashkenazi Jew, and it says Vilna Gaon's student's letter to the lost tribes of Israel, composed in Safed in 1830 Common Era. It says a letter from the Ashkenazi communities of Safed and Jerusalem to the lost tribes that they had hoped would be found by an emissary sent to Yemen in 1830. So this is a letter sent from the Ashkenazi communities. Remember that, a letter sent from the Ashkenazi communities. to the lost tribes of Israel, the 10 tribes. Now let's see what they have to say about the 10 tribes. They send a letter, and it says here, I start from the beginning, thus send the dwellers of the land of Israel, who abide by the Torah of Moses, which is a gift and inherited portion. By this they refer to themselves. So the Ashkenazi community, which they say that they abide by the Torah of Moses, they are sending what they say a letter to their brothers, to our brothers, the children of Israel, meaning the 10 tribes, the son of Isaac, the son of Abraham, who revealed the belief in Hashem. They are our holy and pure brothers, the righteous upon whom the world rests, the Bnei Moshe, servant of Hashem. Now listen to this. Who dwell across the river Shevation, also known as Sambation, and who pledge allegiance to the king of Israel, who sits upon a mighty throne and who rules over the 10 tribes. Now listen to this. Whose settlement is in the land of beyond the rivers of Nubia, Cush. So this Ashkenazi community was sending a letter to the lost tribes of Israel, knowing that their settlement is where? In the land of beyond the rivers of Nubia, Cush. We know that Cush is Ethiopia. If you go beyond Ethiopia, where do you come? You come in the area of the Bantu people, who are descendants of E1B1A, the Bantu Hebrew Israelites. Because beyond Cush is what? You have Kenya, you have Tanzania, and all the way onto West Africa, you have peoples that are descendants of the real Israelites. I read on, who camp according to their banners, the tribe of Dan, of Naphtali, of Gad, and Asher, the tribe of Issachar. All of the 10 tribes are represented within the landmass which is called Africa. Not anywhere else. So this is an amazing resource by which we can prove who the real Israelites are. But let me continue, because there's something that's even more important. They say here, second, what our hearts desire, this thing. It is well known from our rabbis, Rambam first chapter Sanhedrin, that before the Messiah comes, there must be in the land of Israel a court comprised of those ordained in classical semicha, ordination, yet through our sins and through the harsh decrees of the multiple exiles, the ordination has disappeared. So the Ashkenazis say they have no ordination. And the law is that only an ordained can ordain. And Hashem promised that there will be a high court, a Bet Din, as it says, I will restore your judges as it was in the past. Afterward,
Family, I hope that you're seeing this. These fines are so important because basically, if you understand when I say this, I want you to understand this. Don't ever just follow, not understand this. Don't ever just lean on, if you're one of those people that like to study or do genetics tests or things like that, like 21 or 23andMe and stuff like that. Don't just go off of those things. They'll try to say that people are African or different things like that. But remember, they're basing that off of modern stance, not ancient stance, but modern stance. It's important to understand a lot of those, even though a lot of those 23andMe and stuff like that, a lot of those DNA things don't actually work. Don't work the way that they're supposed to work, for the sake of understanding. But you got to be careful when it comes to some of these DNA results. But if they had the perfect understanding and knew that a lot of the Israelis and the Jews were actually in Africa, sent there, not just because they are African, but because they were exiled, then they would actually realize that maybe they're actually taking Africans and turning them to oranges, and taking these people who are actually African American, they say African American, and understanding that the genetics of them actually matches this people in the area of West Africa, but not the people who are native to Africa. Understand this. When I say that, understand that this is something that they know 100%. That there is a Y chromosome called the A00. Look it up. Look up the Y chromosome, the A00 lineage. It's important to understand that the Y chromosome A00 lineage is only found in one people. It's not found in sub-Saharan Africans. It's important to understand that. But that Y chromosome is what I call an isolated Y chromosome. They try to say that that Y chromosome is old. We know there's no millions of billions of years. Rather, that chromosome is so concentrated because it's so pure that this would be the single chromosome that actually will bring us the understanding that this people is actually a pure people. That's actually what that will show us there. That this has every single snap in it. The SNP. This has every single snap in it. In fact, that's what they write. You can find this yourself when they talk about it right here. Because we report the discovery of an African American Y chromosome that carries the ancestral state of all snaps. That defines, basically, it destroys their whole idea of the table that they have. And basically, and what they try to do is say that it shows how old people are. It says, oh, it's old. But rather, who came first? Ham, Shem, or Japheth? Surely Japheth came first. Japheth is the oldest. Ham is the youngest. Shem is the middle. Now, why would their Y chromosome show that they're older than Japheth? That's impossible. That doesn't make any sense. Rather, this Y chromosome is a pure state of all chromosomes. It's at a pure state of all chromosomes, and you can look at the table, and you can tell that this A chromosome that's only found in one people's is, if we take the time and actually examine this and try to trace its lineage, we won't only find the exact people of the book. We will find undeniable evidence that these people that they call African Americans, that they sent into captivity to all nations, these same individuals, we need to consider, do these need to be exiled from Jerusalem? Should we actually exile these people from Jerusalem? Understand why I'm saying this. The reason why I'm saying this, if you haven't seen this, let me just show you something. You gotta see this real fast. If you've never seen this, it's crazy. There's a lot of different ones on it. This is very recent. Just want to find one that's fine. This one's not too long.
Now, have you ever heard of the African Hebrew Israelites? Well, they are a sect of Black Americans who began moving to Israel in the late 1960s, claiming to be descendants of the ancient Israelites. They're known for religious practices that include veganism and polygamy, and number about 3,000 people here in Israel, most of whom live in the southern desert town of Dimona. Now, most have received permanent residency under arrangements with the Israeli government, but now at least 46 families have just received deportation orders from the Interior Ministry saying that they have to leave the country within just 60 days. Well, we have Prince Emmanuel Ben Yehuda joining us from Dimona itself. He's the national spokesman for the African Hebrew Israelites of Jerusalem. So first of all, tell us more about your community and when this movement to Israel began.
Well, thank you very much, Natasha, for having us on this evening. Well, there's a very rich history of tribes across Africa tracing their descendants to the land of Israel. And that also extends into the Americas, where many of the tribes were taken during the slave trade. In fact, there's a book by Professor James Landing out of the University of Chicago called Black Judaism, the History of an American Movement, which traces the presence of African Americans who trace their descendants to Israel back to the 1500s. So it's quite a very rich history that then in 1966, at a Beta Hebrew Cultural Center in Chicago, which was home of one of the many Israelite communities in the Americas, Ben Ami, the spiritual leader of our community and the founder of our community, had a vision that it was time for descendants of the Israelites among African Americans to return to the Holy Land. And a year later, in 1967, he led 350 members of the community back into Liberia for 2.5 years. And then in 1969, the first members of the community began to come back into Israel.
Right.
And that was our beginning back home.
So this is a community that now plays a significant role in Israel. Can you tell us about what kind of role the African Hebrew Israelites play here in Israeli society? Do members of your community go to the army? Do they feel Israeli?
Well, this is our home. We're thoroughly involved. I mean, after a rocky start those first couple of years, we've become very much a part of the fabric of Israeli society. You see us everywhere you go. We've worked with the foreign ministry in the areas of Haspara. We have sent young people to Eurovision. Our children, as you said, serve in the army. We've represented Israel in academic and cultural and sports events around the world. When you turn on the television, you see our young people in Meruta Million and Israeli Ninja. So we're very much a part of every element of society as you look across the country, employed in various areas. This is our home, and we've grown up together.
So why are we seeing the Israeli government now issuing deportation orders to families?
That's a good question, especially after the fact that for the last almost 10 years, we've been reaching out to government offices, especially the Ministry of Interior, hoping to resolve problem cases that have surfaced. And so it hasn't been on an effort, for lack of effort on our part in terms of looking to solve problems. But after not getting an answer for years and years and years to be responded to with deportation orders, the question becomes why? You know, we're not strangers. Obviously, we weren't hiding. We were trying to find a solution to these situations where people have been here for decades. Young people have born here, grown up here, married here, and having no status. And that's not.
If you're American, or if you're in a country where if you're born there, you get status to live there, notice that these individuals who are so-called, you can't call them African, you can't call them American. When the child is born in that area, you know what they are? They're named after the area. That child is an Israeli in that area. That child is an Israeli. You have these children that are born there that they're trying to deport. Understand this when I say this. If you look very closely at the Y chromosome, it's undeniable that Y chromosome, that A00, is not connected to anyone else, not a Hamite. And if we had to go there, if it's not based upon race, then why are the Ashkenazis that don't have the same skull shape, nor has any historical connection to Israel, because they're not, understand, you can't trace history to them going to the Rhinelands. You can't. There's no historical document saying the Jews migrated to the Rhinelands. That's not documented, because the actual documented thing is that the Turks came there and converted, which is what they are. That's actually, it's no way to discredit it. The genetic information confirms it without a doubt, especially their major Y chromosome, without a doubt. And the historical evidence agree with the same time zone, 740 AD. Very important to understand, those people are not biblical Judeans. Understand when I say this, they're not the biblical Judeans genetically, linguistically, by the language, because just like how we looked at the word, the name, I mean the language of Yiddish, very important to understand when studying that, linguistics, genetics, even the scriptures, the name Ashkenaz, right, biblically and geographically. And we can compare them with the Armenians, and we can see that they're the same as the Armenians. So it's very important to understand that we ourselves, we need to examine this. Is this right? Is this right? Is anyone going to stand up for those children in Israel that are being deported? They have nowhere else to go. Nowhere else to go. And is anyone going to prove them that if they actually are Israeli or they belong to that area, they're not Hamites. Look at the Zonderberg, was it Zonderberg or something dictionary in the Young's dictionary? It'll tell you clear as day that they're not Hamites. They're not. They're just not Hamites. And even so, they're born there. They're going to deport children that's born there. That's what they're doing. In 60 days, they're going to deport children that were born in Israel. So what they're going to say? That they don't belong there? For what reason don't they belong there compared to an Ashkenazi? When we look at the genetics, it's really interesting to see these things happen like this. Is it because they're color? Because they're the way they look? Is this another modern age of racism?
It's not a conscionable situation to take at this time in the 21st century.
How has the Hebrew Israelite community responded to this order for deportation? What has the reaction been among community members?
Well, first of all, there's been shock, there's been anger, there's been a full range of emotions in terms of what the feelings are. But what's been most gratifying is that as we've reached out in terms of reaching out to inform the public of what has taken place, the overwhelming show of support, and I want to thank the Israeli public as a whole for reaching out and providing some level of comfort and support for members of our community during something of a traumatic time. At the same time, we've also been reaching out to various legal advisors to help us put together an intelligence strategy to respond effectively to the Ministry of Interior's plan. Likewise, we're reaching out to politicians at a difficult time since there's no government. Mm-hmm. We're trying to find someone who will listen and take some proactive position seeking to cancel this order. There's not many offices that you can go to affect that kind of change. But historically, we've been able to work with a various number of personalities which have come to our aid and work with us to help advance, not just for us, but for all of Israeli society.
I want you to know something about these people. See, these people are more kinder than some of us over here. These people have no problem with saying the Ashkenazi are Jews. They have no problem with that, though they're not. The Ashkenazi are not Jews, but yet these ones are not saying the Ashkenazis are not Jews. They're not cursing at anyone. They're not fighting. When you think of Hebrew Israelites, a lot of people, they think of the ones that fight and get all the publicity because of the controversy of the fighting and the cursing and debating and things like that. That's not what makes you understand this. Paul was a Hebrew Israelite. Paul said it himself. He was a Hebrew and an Israelite. All the 12 disciples, what did it say? They were going to reign over the 12 tribes of Israel. Were they not Israelites? Many of them were Israelites. It's important to understand this. A real Israelite is like Paul. A real Israelite, a real Hebrew Israelite is like Peter. Just because they're darker skinned, and who else was darker skinned? Was not Moses when he said, you look like an Egyptian to Moses? What did Egyptians look like? Did not Paul also look like an Egyptian? Joseph, Messiah blended in Egypt, hiding from the Romans. Now, let's understand something when I say this. Understand this. When it comes to race, a lot of people, they look at color. If we don't look at the actual evidence of proof, then we won't understand. That's why I'm doing this, because I want people to actually realize the historical evidence, the geographic evidence, the linguistic evidence, and the biblical evidence actually shows that the people who a lot of people don't like, especially because of certain groups. And understand, if you've seen, I debated with a lot of the so-called Hebrew Israelite camps for the sake of understanding, like Safari and stuff like that. We wilding out in the Passover and stuff. Understand when I'm saying this. There is in all cultures, all races, all people, a people that is going to cause offense. There's always going to be a group that's going to cause offense. It's just gonna happen. You don't group a whole group into one person or one group's thing. You don't group them all. You look at things fairly. And no one, when we look at the understanding of what I'm saying here, people need to understand that these individuals who they say don't belong there actually do belong there. That's the problem, is that they're actually there to try to get their life together, to live a life without all the hedonism which the nations brought upon the people. That's not our culture. Hip hop is not the culture. When you see stuff like Black History, they like to invent the way that people are. This is not how they were. This is modern inventions on how people are. A lot of people, when they think Black people, they think hip hop, R&B, and the BET movement, all that nonsense. But that's not actually how Israel was before. They have been sent into captivity to all nations and have fallen by the edge of the sword until the time of the Gentiles come in. So now they're being deported from Israel, though they're born there, though the children are born there, and they themselves won't have nowhere else to go but some other place. Did not the scripture say that we are like fatherless? We're like widows. Our home is taken from us. And this is what's happening again. They're being deported from this land. And who's going to call out and have some support for these brothers and sisters that are going to have no place to go and have to get used to a whole nother lifestyle? Remember, these kids who are here, they were born there, and that's what they were raised on. But let's continue to see, because I want you to see the ending of this, because it's important to even hear these things.
We feel like we're a very unique community and have brought a lot to this to the country, both nationally and internationally. And we feel like it's an advantage to all of us to work together and continue in that pattern.
So, you know, if there was any message that you could send to the Israeli government and to people who are watching this and want to learn more about your community and understand its role here in Israel, what would that be?
I would say to the government, reflect the character of your people. The people of Israel have embraced us and we have embraced each other. And if the government would likewise do the same, we would be able to continue to work together and show forth a great deal of light to the rest of the world, which is being torn apart by racial hatred, religious hatred, and all kinds of divisions being played out on our screens every day and on news programs. So I would say, reflect the character of your people, reach out and embrace us, work together with us, and solve problems, and let's show the world the character of Israel.
All right. Well, I would like to thank you for joining us and kind of giving us some background about your community. You know, I also want to just quickly ask
ability to contribute to the improvement of someone's health, from organic agriculture to veganism to positive music to only natural clothes. So we say, let's be that different.
All right, so understand this. I'm gonna close this. Understands the evidence is actually showing us that the people who are of the northern tribes, well documented, actually were sent into Africa. In fact, I just seen somebody post a interesting thing on this question forum. I'm gonna show you something real fast once that thing pops up. But first, let me show you the rest of this. Then I'll show you something real fast.
Words, you'll be known as the city of justice, a center of truth. Zion shall be redeemed through justice, and its returnees through charity. And this will happen without a doubt once the Creator helps people become attracted to the Torah before the coming of Moshiach. And as we have heard, listen to this, and as we have heard that you, talking about those that are in the land of Africa, that you have a Sanhedrin ordained from ordained, as you adjudicate capital cases. Please select some of your ordained wise men to come to Israel to ordain scholars so that we'll have in Israel a court comprised of ordained, because the beginning of the redemption hinges on this. I hope you caught this, because this is proof, according to Jewish resources, rabbinical resources, that they do not have any ordination of the Most High. But the ordination lies where? With the black Jews, those that are beyond the rivers of Cush. Those Israelites have the real ordination of the Most High. I think this is enough proof for us. Shalom.
Thank you. It's very much a pleasure to be here.
All right, let me just copy this thing real fast. I'm gonna see if I can, because I think that this is really something. Just found this real fast, and I want to see if I can put this here. So they're just basically talking on what we were just talking on. I guess they found this as well. I guess 2020 they found this. They was writing some things about the Assyrian captivity. This is why we talk about the Assyrian captivity and what Sennacherib did. What the king of Assyria did, the king of Sennacherib, remember what they did? They took them and they displaced people. That's how they would when they capture people, they don't keep them. They would actually displace them. They would put them in different areas. Let me see if I can open this. I'm not reading that second Ezra. Go down a little bit. See if I can find it. So here's a little something. This one just talks about the lost tribes and everything. It talks about where they're at. I'm gonna go down. All right, so right here. So this right here is a writing. You can see who is this? Let's see. Okay, so he says, so the Israelites were indeed taken to Assyria, but ended up in Africa. And this is further information in, you can see right here, in this little source he has. So he has something that's written by this rabbi, what they call him a rabbi and whatnot. He says, go down. He's basically taking a screenshot there. Dear Rabbi, someone asked a question. He asked a question right here. I recently saw a document that explained that the lost 10 tribes of Israel were exiled to the Far East and settled along the Silk Road as far as China. So he says this person thinks that the 10 tribes went to China. What do Jewish sources say about this? So this is just someone asking a question and says, are they or their customs really Jewish? What does Judaism say about whether the law or whether these lost tribes will even reunite with the Jewish people? Thanks in advance and taking the time to take the time to answer. Okay, watch he answers here. He's gonna write to him. This is a so-called Jewish rabbi. Watch what he says here. Going down, watch what he says here. I want to show you here what happens. Where were the tribes exiled? King of Assyria, watch what it says here, carried Israel away into Assyria, right? Took them to Assyria. They did what they did with them. And it says, in addition to Assyria, they were also exiled through Egypt. Where's Egypt? Well, that should be easy, right? Because Egypt is in Africa. See what's happened there? Who was sent into Africa? The 10 tribes. He just said the 10 tribes were sent into Africa. That's what he just said there. Single-handedly, this rabbi just said they were sent into Africa. To Pathros. See what's there? Right there, what it's saying? On the eastern, the southern Nile. All right. So all we gotta do, Pathros. That one I'm not super familiar with. I have an idea. Let's see that one. Let me make sure I'm spelling that right. Gross. Let's see. All right. I'm pretty sure that's not it. Let me actually see if it says further down. Let me just put it in here. And just see if it will show me. Or am I typing it? Mistyping it. Because it's letting us know Patros on the southern Nile to Patros. Patros, Africa. This one I'm not too familiar with, this location. Maybe it's a certain thing there. I'm not sure. I'm not familiar with this location. If anyone is familiar, maybe it's a different name or something. Let me see. I'm actually not familiar with. I know Patros as in the place that's at Greek, but I've never seen one in by the Nile. Patros. Let me just make sure I'm putting it exactly as it's written. just see if I can see this one. I'm not familiar with this location. Patros. Just seeing if I can find it on one of these maps. Maybe it would show me where it's at. All right, I'm not too familiar. I'm not too familiar with this place, but it's letting us know this person's saying that it's in Egypt, but I'm not too familiar with the location. Pathros? Oh, okay. That would make more sense. Pathros. Okay. That one's actually in Egypt. It's probably they're just I guess he just spelt it kind of very interesting. Let me see. If I remember, I would go to it because I feel like I know where that's at. But I just want to double check here. Just double checking. I'm just seeing if there's a different name to it because it is lower. Is that area is actually in Lower Egypt, but I forget exactly where on a map. I forget exactly where. Just looking here, it should be like over here, pretty much. If I don't find it, I'll just basically it's like this. Otherwise, that area that he's talking about there is basically somewhere around here. I don't know exactly where. I don't know if the name changed or anything like that. Just looking. Just taking a look here. All right. But I know that is actually in Lower Egypt in these areas over here. So it's basically saying they were sent into Egypt and going downward. That's basically what it's saying there. It's basically in short answer, it's saying that they went into Egypt and went downwards into Egypt, into what they call Pathros, which sounds familiar, but looking here, maybe it was a certain area in the time. So you can see that's where they went. And that's what he's saying here. You see what he's saying there? He's saying that they went into Egypt, right? On the southern Nile and Kush, right? Ethiopia. Now that one we can understand, right? We go down, you can see where Ethiopia is and everything. Is letting us know they went down into these areas, right? In fact, just taking a look here. Yeah. And this is where they went. So they said they went here, and that's prophecy. That's actually prophecy. That's what he says on the rivers that further past the rivers of Ethiopia. He'll call back his people. So he brought them down. They went into these areas. That's what he's saying. The 10 tribes went in. That's what he's saying here. He says also exiled throughout Egypt to Pathos on the southern Nile and Cush, Ethiopia. Also mentioned in Isaiah 11:11. Which let's look at that. Isaiah 11:11. Let's just take a quick peek at that one. It says, in that day, the Lord will search out, well, the Lord will reach out his hand a second time to reclaim the surviving remnant of his people from Assyria, from Lower Egypt, from Upper Egypt, from Cush, from Elam, from Babylon, from Babylonia, from Hamath, and from the islands of the Mediterranean, right? And that's great because that also is touching on what their book is saying, right? That they went into Africa. Now watch what it says. It says the Talmud also says the tribes were exiled to both Africa and to the mountains of slag, snow. Quite possibly referring to Ethiopia. See what it's saying there? So it's saying they went down into Ethiopia. That's what he's saying there. He's saying they down here. That's what he said the 10 tribes are. The 10 tribes are down here. So what would they look like? Well, how can we find them? They probably blend in with the locals, but they'll have something different about them. Something be much different about them. So the 10 tribes are down there. So why are they lost? Okay. So you can see what he's saying there. He's saying, and to the mountains of Western Iran. Similarly, the famous Jewish historian, Roman times, Flavius, All right, so this is going to be Flavius Josephus Flavius. The 10 tribes are beyond the Euphrates. Look what Josephus writes. He says Josephus even knew what the 10 tribes were, in the iniquities, right? In its antiquities, or what have you. Watch what it says here. The 10 tribes are beyond the Euphrates until this day, and are immersive multitude, immersive in multitude whose numbers cannot be estimated. So if their numbers are so large and they're in Africa, past Euphrates and whatnot, beyond Euphrates and everything, we actually got to understand what's going on here. Well, this Euphrates is going to be upwards for sake of understanding. They actually are going to be sent all over. But we're actually getting a note that there are actually some in Africa. There's some in Africa. So let's understand this. Let's understand what's going on here. If we actually go and look at that previous information that we looked at before in the Talmud, we've seen the direct thing that he's actually quoting here. We talk about the Talmud and everything. We actually know that that's what happened here. That's what actually happened. Let me show you another one. This one also talks about pretty much what they were sent. I'm gonna go to one that's under here that I think is fairly interesting. And go down. Okay, right here. It says this one was very early. It says basically that Sennacherib, when it talks about that leader of Assyria, the successor, and then it says king of Assyria, having continued the war, right? Pretty much right here, conquered the kingdom of Israel and brought the captive Jews. So notice why they call now. Notice that he calls the kingdom of Israel Jews. Why? Because the word Jew, like Yehuda and all that stuff like that, belongs to those who belong to Jerusalem. So they just, I don't know, they just call them Jews. It says, and brought the captive Jews and their king Hosea to his country. So they went to Assyria. That's why he said they went to Assyria. And says, and from thence they eventually found their way to, let's look at this place. Let's look at this place here. Let's go to Google because this thing. Go to Google and let's look at this certain place. I've never seen this place before. Abyssinia. And I'm going to try to pronounce it. My pronunciation skills is not the best. Let me see. I'm just going to make sure I have that exactly as it says. Looks like it's next to Ethiopia right there. Okay, I'm going to go to the map. So this is where he's saying that they are. So remember what I just said there, right here, is letting us know that he sent them down into Africa. So we have multiple, what's the word I'm looking for? Multiple witnesses that say that the people went into Africa, right? And you can see right here that after the destruction of Jerusalem by Vespasian in 70 AD, that's the 70 AD captivity, the fall of Second Jerusalem, large numbers of Jews fled or drifted into Ethiopia and the areas where you see right here, the into Africa. So we just looked at this area, that's Africa. So you can see here, a little idea of it. You can see here. I want to exactly pinpoint where it is. Somaliland right here. Okay. So here's Kush. Okay. So basically here. I guess it had a certain end right next to Somalia, right? I wonder is it named on here that's still that name anywhere. So sometimes it's okay because sometimes ancient names change. Names of places change. So sometimes that can happen. That's all right. So down here will be where they would be. So where Ethiopia is. So it's saying that there was indeed Jews down here. That's what they're saying. That they said they came down into these areas. And it's actually known in multiple other different resources that they were mainly in these areas. They end up in these areas. Also, when they were sent from Portugal, right? They're not going to stay in these areas. The Muslims, they were in these areas, and different people that would persecute them. But they would have went downwards. They would have went downwards, and they would have made their way over here and settled in these areas down here. Or if they want to try to make their way to Egypt. But depending on that route, that most likely would not have happened, especially with some of the persecution that was going on even in Egypt. So they would have settled down here. And that's what this is saying. It's saying that they had pretty much was seen all over. Here's another one. It says this one, see what this 1588 shows a Jewish state distinctively marked as, what's that, Judo, I'm never gonna try to, Judorantaria of his African map. So he's basically, let me see if we can even see that on here. Just taking a look. I wish that he had put like a arrow there so we can see where that's at. I want to know where he's looking at. Just taking a quick peek at it. Maybe. Well, I'm not too sure where it is on here, but they sure know. Maybe he put a clue somewhere. I don't know. They put a clue. Just put a bunch of pictures. Soon, just looking. All right. Somewhere down here. This looks like a little area here. Just taking a look there. All right. So you can see some writings here letting us know that they were indeed in Africa. That's a lot of different writings confirming that they were indeed in Africa. Here's another one. Just talking about, I guess this one's on those areas. Right here it says, likewise on the north part of the kingdom of Guillaume and the southern quarter of the kingdom of Gohan, there are certain mountains peopled with Jews. So he's letting us know in these areas there was land. This is the land of Hebrews. He's even letting us know that this is down to, I'm guessing this, the Nilus. I'm guessing that is the Nile. I would believe so. And it's talking about the area of Africa. Maybe it's a different area, but this is indeed, as we see, with these two areas in Africa. Going down as saying there was Jews down there. So it says it appeared that there's a Jewish state in the region, in this area. I'm talking about this person said that that's a Jewish state down there that's under Jewish rule, that is saying in this area. So it's a lot of things that's confirming these things, that's letting us know that it was accepted. And there's a couple different historians that let us know that Africans were down there. Well, not Africans, but this darker Judeans were down there. Is it so hard to believe that some of the Judeans may be darker skinned? Is it that hard to believe that maybe they were darker skinned and that would make sense for Paul to be called a Egyptian? Or for Moses, who's of the line of Levi, which is unmixed, and calling him an Egyptian? Surely the people knew what an Egyptian was in that time. They would know what an Egyptian looks like. It was like the major, it wasn't like Egypt was a small tribe of people. Egypt was like America. Egypt was in that time was like, but one stalk of Egypt. And we know this because throughout the scriptures, it tells us that a lot of things that the Hebrews did were abomination. They saw themselves as a higher race, better than everyone else. That's what Egypt saw itself as. Right here, this is a great one right here. Let me see if he got a, see, that's why I like to, when you reference something, I think it's important to put the date and the source. So I don't know what, let me see if he has a source for this one. Not, or among them. So what happened to Kingdom of Judah? Some fled, replacement. Not sure what exactly this is, but it wouldn't be hard to find. It says, of the second invasion of Bantu, southern or South Africa, we have, however, more historical and trustworthy data. On account of ancient Babylonian and Sumerian elements, because Sumerians, they got that the writings of the, I was going to show that a little earlier with those weird things that they have. They have these, I forgot what you call them, but it's a different writing system that they have, a way different writing system. But they recorded some things. They kept recording different things and whatnot. Show you real fast that writing system. If it's here, right here. Oh, what's that? Cuneiform. Oh, I don't know how you exactly pronounce that. Maybe someone knows how to say that. It's not. It shouldn't be too hard. But I'm not gonna. I want to miss it real fast. So this type of writing, which looks like this right here. So you can see this type of writing, get an idea. So they would have had a lot of different um, uh, recordings, a lot of different things, recordings to show what's going on. So watch what it says here. So let's talk about that. Sumerian elements in some of the Bantu dialect. This invasion must have come from months of Tigris and Euphrates, months of the Tigris and Euphrates. Okay. And their numbers were undoubtedly been strengthened by many Shemites who, for some reason or another, had considered it advisably to leave their original habitation. All right. Okay. They left their original habitation. All right. Sea people, man. So I'm gonna skip down a little bit, but it's gonna sea close. Okay. Talk about the sea peoples. Let me just look at this last one to see if this is something. Yeah. Okay. A huge slaughter took place, and those who did not fall by the sword left the country and sought refuge in islands of the Persian Gulf. Okay, so it's actually talking about the northern captivity. It's talking about the northern tribe captivity. Okay, but it's also about this certain king of Assyria. It says equipped a large fleet and attacked the rebels in the island. Sucks and is driving them out even in his refuge. Okay, and it says this one actually has something at the bottom. Oh, okay. He highlights some things at the bottom, but this sounds important too. It says it is more than likely that the men who were thus driven out of their country were aware that in or near Somaliland, Somaliland, which is here, so they're near that area, saying on the neighboring coast of Africa, there were living races who were nearly related to them. Okay, so they went into these areas and they found races that were related to them. I'm gonna go down for that reason. I believe that that these fugitives, of whom nothing more is heard in Assyrian history, found a haven in Somaliland or Somaliland. Basically saying he's letting people know that the Jews that were taken in exile, they first went to an island. I don't know what island that is. They went into some type of island and it didn't work out. They got attacked by the Assyrians there and they went down. So something must have happened. It could have happened over here, could happen over there. I don't know what exact island, but they were pushed downward. They ended up going downward and hiding out down here. That's what ended up happening here. That's what it's saying. And it's saying, okay, so Somaliland, and proceeded to join the Bantu tribe. Which Bantu, if you looked into the Bantu tribe, that's a known Judean tribe in Africa. It's known. There's no doubt that those are Judeans in Africa. Very important to see that. The Igbo tribes and the Bantu, important to know a little bit about that. That's without a doubt. They know that those are Judeans. It says, and joined the Bantu tribes near the lakes. Assyrian Chronicles place the flight of the men of the seacoast in 680 BC. So they're talking about something that happened in 680 BC. It's saying that they went to Africa. That's what it's saying right there. Invasion Africa. It's basically talking about they went into Africa. I wish wish I could find this source. I wonder where he got this source from. Really interesting source there for that. I'll look for the words and maybe find something to cross-reference it with. But that's nice. It's nice when people bring their evidences and we can compare that with other evidences. And we see that indeed the people went down into Africa. Now, does that mean that they're not scattered? Now, understand this. It's possible for someone to be mixed with Israel. A lot of like it says, Ephraim is a cake unturned. So it's possible, as it says, the 10 tribes are beyond the Euphrates, right? And to this day, for the sake of understanding. So you can see that they can be all over, all around. But take note that it is documented that a lot of them went into Africa. A lot of them went to Africa. How is that not hard to understand? And then we can look at the evidences of the, like I said right here, right? They would have fit in. They would have matched in because we could see what they said they look like. This is a depiction. Remember, this is a depiction that the Assyrians who seen the Israelites, the northern tribe, and seen what they look like.
Slaves that are leaving the city. Now, somebody tell me the difference between this guy and this guy. Whose side do you think this guy's on? The Assyrians, yeah, the conquerors, the Assyrians. And whose side do you think this guy's on? The slave, yeah, the people from Israel or Lachish. You can tell also by their distinctive hairstyle depicted in archaeology.
So this person, he's going and he's teaching them a large group. He's standing within a large group. The British Museum is allowing him to do this and to give all these things that's said. And he's defining what is shown, and it cannot be denied what's shown or what's said, because we have to look at the actual evidence. So they look like Africans. Their genetics seem like they're Africans, but they're not Africans, because when we look at their genetics, there's that A00 lineage that's not in sub-Saharan Africans. It's also noticed that in the scriptures, they define them as looking African. Remember, Ephraim and Manasseh, what were they mixed with? They were mixed with Hamites. Ephraim and Manasseh were Hamites, right? Not Hamites as in they were Hamites, because Joseph is the line of the father that they are blessed by. Clearly, they're going to be Shemites, but they are actually mixed with Hamites. They're mixed in. And also remember, Moses also mixed in with a Hamite. But yet they are blessed because of Moses, because of the line of the father. And we also see that with, if you never noticed, in the scripture, it talks about how, in long stories short, if you've seen that story of the Levite that pretty much went through it, and then he had to basically, his handmaid died, and then he had to cut her up and send her out to the tribes, and then they ended up fighting with Benjamin. And then Benjamin became very small. It was like 600 of them. And then Benjamin mixed with Ephraim and Manasseh. Ephraim and Manasseh basically became one with Ephraim. And Ephraim and Manasseh is Egyptian. So Benjamin, surely at least someone in Israel should look Egyptian. One of them should look Egyptian. Someone has to. There's no way around it. Because if we look at the actual evidence, it's always defined that they look like Hamites. But they're not Hamites. But they're defined as looking like Hamites. Is that hard to consider? I don't think it's hard to consider if we look at the actual evidence and look at these things. I think it's fair if we look at the actual truth behind these things. If you ever find something more on this, let me know, because I'll definitely I will take that information. I'm gonna try to look into these things and see if I can find a little more on this direct information. I just saw this real fast, and I said might as well just go over it for the sake of understanding, as it is in unison with the topic that we're talking about. So it's very important to understand that this is something that was known. This was something that was known in history. A lot of rabbis even talk about it. They know that they went down into Africa and whatnot, so-called rabbis and everything. This is actually important for us to take in. This is very important for us to take in, that we ourselves as a people, our ways are not right. We have to examine the evidence of truth. We have to examine the evidence of truth, because the modern ways of this world, the modern ways is saying if it doesn't look like it fit, it probably doesn't fit. But it may be that the looks aren't everything. Looks are not everything, and that maybe we need to look at these things on a more closer pinpoint scale, as in historical documents and considering the genetics. We have to consider it. Now, obviously, don't just take the genetics and run with it. Examine it very closely with the historical evidence, with the actual historical writings. And that's what we actually understand when we see that the 10 tribes are in Africa. So that's important. That's very important to understand when we look at these things. Now, I just want to show you, because I did end. If you've seen before, I already ended on showing you that indeed, the people they were seen going in Africa, and it's also mentioned that people who believe these things truly knows that the people are also in Africa. I showed you this last time, but I'll show it one more time for the sake of understanding.
Hi. Some of my recent work, if you read the hybrid very attentively, you'll have to go to the footnotes. You will see there's got a lot of evidence produced for black Jewish communities in different parts of West Africa, which are not sort of based upon a particular reading of tribal history, let's put it like that, but are based on fairly hard historical fact. And this hard historical fact is the expulsion of the Jews from Spain and from Portugal at the end of the 15th century, subsequent to which a lot of Jews settled, first of all, in northwest Africa, places like Senegal, in the islands, which I'm sure you know about, Saint Tomé and Principe.
Yes, sir.
Principally. And then, less known, along the coast of Guinea, so that in the middle of the 16th century, 1560 to be precise, the Portuguese Archbishop of Goa in India proclaimed that Judaism was a kind of horrible illness which has killed millions of people throughout history, and the result of being Jewish was to be covered in shame, to fail in everything, even among the black Jews of Guinea. So, in other words, the existence of Jews in the western part of Africa was absolutely accepted at the time by the likes of the Portuguese Archbishop of Goa.
So, beloved family, the reason why I wanted to show you these things is because I think it's important just to know even the Assyrian captivity so that we can connect these things in perfect understanding. Not going to go into the mountain people right now. I'll probably go into that another time. Close that. So I wanted to show you this because we looked into these things fairly, right? We looked into the genetics, we looked into the information of these things to examine these things with a fair result. And it's without a doubt that the people, the Ashkenazi, they're actually Turks. They're actually Turks, and not just Turks. They're going to be a mingle of Turks and of the barbarians, for who you call the barbarians. You're going to be a lot of Turks. You're going to have obviously that Philistine line in them. This is very important. There's no Y chromosome in them that's isolated. It's very important to understand. What do I mean by isolated Y chromosome? There's no Y chromosome that we can say that is only to them and no one else. Or we can say it's only to them and someone who is related biblically to them. Understand this. It's very important to understand that the people today who they're related to are Turks. Very important to understand. The Iranians, a lot of them, Persians, Turks. A lot of them are Turks. A lot of people in those areas, modern in those areas today, are Turks. Even the people in Egypt today, they're not the original people who was in Egypt. It's important to understand that a lot of these people were displaced by Turks. The Turks were pretty much a people that invaded and pretty much knocked out a lot of people and took over a lot of people in their areas. So that's what just happened in history, is that when the Turks came in, the confusion became at a peak. But rather in this time, we're not going to sit in confusion. We're going to examine all things and find the truth. And that's why even this person that I showed you found out the same thing, that the Ashkenazi are Turks. And the people that are being deported from Israel today might indeed, without a doubt, be the original ancient Israelites of the scriptures. And genetically, linguistically, the study, it has to happen. There has to be a more deeper study into these things without just taking the common quote. There's a common quote, but if you look into the evidence of these things, it's undeniable. It's undeniable for the sake of understanding. The history, the genetics, and everything is in agreement. But the reason why I want to show you this, just to end it with this, let me close this one and close this one and this one and this one and this one. All right. The reason why I wanted to show you this is because when we actually look at this information very closely, very, very closely, let me just open up that thing I just closed right here. This will be in the description. The Assyrian captivity. The Assyrian captivity is known in history to be one of those captivities that caused a lot of people to go into captivity into different areas. And this Assyrian captivity, for the sake of understanding, is documented with its own stone. But it's important to note that this certain captivity, the people that were taken was defined as looking like Africans, but they weren't Africans, and they were sent into Africa at the end of the report. And there's also historical confirmation saying that people knew that they was in Africa. So I just say that when we take up, like, for example, when we look at certain genetic, like, for example, E1B1A, when we look up E1B1A, we should also consider that the ancient Arabs also had E1B1A. We also should consider that the people, remember that the ancient Arabs would come from Abraham. We should consider that maybe instead of going off of things locationally, that we should go off of things more precise, instead of saying, okay, these people are in Africa, so therefore they must have always been in Africa, but rather say, do these individuals have a isolated chromosome? Do they have an isolated Y chromosome? Do they have a Y chromosome that no one else has? Because that's how we'll find Israel. And how will we know that they would have a Y chromosome that no one else has? Because they have their father of fathers and fathers and fathers and fathers. If they're Israel, it should be a chain unbroken to a pure source. And I have to tell you that A00 lineage is the only Y chromosome that shows such a clear understanding like that. So with that, family, I just wanted to touch on the Assyrian conquests that had happened and what happened to the people and everything, just to show you that that's historical, and there's information that people may know or may not know based upon what happened to the Assyrians. So with that, I hope that this was something for someone that is hungry for information, because truth is gonna show itself. And remember, I'm showing you these things before it happened. When the time come, you're gonna know that the Assyrian is still an Assyrian. If you remember in the scriptures, the Lord describes what He's going to do to Assyria. Very important to understand, because who is Assyria actually fighting against? Assyria's not fighting against the people. Assyria's fighting against God, against the Messiah Himself. Now, it's very important to understand that. So with that, family, be blessed, be beloved, and amen.